second part of our 4-session Mindful Living course. If you haven't watched session 1 already, then we suggest that you pause here and go back and watch that. There's some really useful practices it would be good to try. This session, we're going to be exploring the breath and how the breath can help us in our mindfulness practice. Okay, let's go inside and figure out what we really mean by the breath. The breath has been a central part of meditation practice for thousands of years. It's one of the first things that often comes to mind when we think about meditation. Sarah and Kiri, what are your thoughts on the breath?
I like it. I like it because it's always there. We're always breathing. I have this sense that I could befriend my breath, that maybe recognise it as a lifelong companion, there when I need it. I also like the fact that it's free. It doesn't cost a thing to follow the breath.
I think the thing I like about the breath is that to me, it's quite calming. Sometimes I just need to take a breath. And there it is. It's my chance to perhaps slow things down when things have got busy for me. It helps me to not jump to kind of knee-jerk reactions to things that are going on. When I come back to the breath and I calm down, the present moment tends to be manageable despite what else is going on.
I can really relate to that. The pause that the breath can give you, I find really, really helpful. It stops me from kind of jumping in, as you were saying, and my tendency is to jump in and automatically try and fix things if they're not right or make things different. But the breath just gives me that pause to stop and potentially step back and really kind of come to a wiser position, potentially. It reminds me that actually I'm coping in this moment, so I'm not getting ahead of myself and thinking about how I'm not going to be able to cope in the future, but if I can just pause and notice that here I am in this moment and actually I'm coping okay, perhaps I can cope in the next moment and the next, rather than getting into my head.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I have this kind of sense that, I don't know, by attending to the breath, I'm kind of attending to myself. I find it really helpful. So it kind of reduces heightened emotions. When we kind of focus on the breath, it gives us a chance to just deal with our experience in the present moment, but in a way that does feel more manageable. So if you're feeling very stressed and then you spend some time on the breath, there's at least a good chance that you might notice some of those stress levels start to reduce. Just makes it feel a bit easier to be in the present moment.
Absolutely, and the breath can be a really powerful way to return our attention to the present moment. When we do that, sometimes the problems seem to have disappeared. That said, paying close attention to the breath isn't for everybody. Some people can find it quite difficult focusing in on the breath. If you find breath meditation difficult for you, that's absolutely fine. You're able to move on and choose practices within the course that are potentially more suited to you.
Yeah, I think that goes for the whole of this course. Just, by all means experiment with the meditations and the practices, but it's absolutely fine to move on and do other ones if that works better for you. So, we've had the beginning to explore the breath, but it is a big topic. One might even say it's universal. We're joined by Paul to help us explore how breathing works. So we just alluded to the fact that the breath is universal. But what do we mean by that?
So what we mean is that all life forms are breathing. So if we're living, then we're breathing. So this is the same for people, animals, even plants and trees. So we're breathing all the time because it's a vital part of being alive. We're all breathing as we sit here and as you watch this. Paul, you are still breathing, right?
I think so, yes.
Good.
Yeah, I can confirm he is. So we're going to have a little think about the physiology of breathing. That sounds a little bit scary, but all I mean is just the mechanics of what's going on inside our bodies as we breathe. I personally found this very helpful to kind of get my head around myself when I was learning breath meditation. It just seems to enhance my practice to have a bit of a sense of what's going on inside while I follow the breath. So, Paul, would you be happy if we use you to demonstrate some concepts?
Well, I don't know. What have I got to do?
Just breathe.
Okay.
In fact, I think that should be something that comes quite easily because breathing is an automatic process. So we don't have to think about it, do we? Our bodies are just breathing all the time. But we can actually have some input into the breath as well. We could control it if we wanted to. You could hold your breath, just not for too long. And even when we're not controlling it, we can still observe the breath. So when we meditate, we're not trying to control the breath, but we are taking notice of it. And the fact that it is an automatic process, but something we can observe, kind of makes it perfect for meditation.
So I've got probably a basic question. Why is it that we need to breathe?
I can answer this one, I think. So our bodies are made up of billions and billions of cells, and all of those cells need oxygen in order to survive. So when we breathe in, we're breathing oxygen into the body, into the lungs, and that is transferred around the body into the cells.
That's right. And while the cells are busy respiring and breathing and doing all their kind of metabolic activity, they're also creating a byproduct, carbon dioxide. If carbon dioxide levels get too high in the body, it would become toxic. So part of the reason we breathe out is to get rid of excess carbon dioxide from that process.
Okay, so how do we actually breathe?
Paul, can we demonstrate on you?
Yes, will it hurt?
No. I just would like you to take a few kind of slow but quite deep breaths and just see what happens.
Okay.
So as Paul is breathing, what you notice is his torso's moving. And that's because inside his body, his lungs are filling up with air. So the lungs are about there, and they're in the front of the body, but also the back of the body. They're quite big. And as we breathe in, the lungs are filling up, and as we breathe out, the lungs kind of deflate again, hence the movement in the region of the chest. One little point is to just maybe bear in mind that the lungs are also in the back of the body, because we tend to think of breathing as something in the front of the body and in the chest. And not everyone feels comfortable following the breath in that part of the body. And if that was a bit difficult for you, you might want to experiment with following the breath in the back of the body. So it's just nice to have that kind of option there.
Kiri, when I'm breathing, and particularly in my meditations, I notice that my belly is moving as well as my lungs. Is that just me, or is that a normal thing?
So what do you notice, Paul? Is there movement in the belly as well?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
See, as I breathe in, my belly goes out. And as I breathe out, my belly goes in.
Fantastic. So in meditation, we kind of tend to call that belly breathing, and it's quite a well-known place to follow the breath in. It's often considered quite a relaxing place of the body. And again, I think understanding the mechanics of the breath helps to explain that a little bit, in that when we breathe in, as you said, the belly's kind of filling up, but we often think that's because we're breathing in air to the belly. So it's quite a common misconception. I don't know if anyone else has thought that. But we're not actually breathing air into the belly. It's all down to another part of the body called the diaphragm, which is like a muscle that kind of goes across the whole of our torso, just below the lungs. And the diaphragm's quite instrumental in breathing. So when we breathe in, the diaphragm pushes down, and that kind of makes space for the air to come into the body. And when we breathe out, the diaphragm pops back into its rest position, allowing the air to be expelled. Now, a byproduct of the diaphragm moving around inside our bodies is that it affects the belly. So when it moves down, it kind of takes up extra space and pushes the belly out, which makes us feel or notice the belly kind of expanding. And when it pops back into its rest position, it creates more space inside the body, so the belly can move back in.
I find this idea of the diaphragm moving back into the rest position and the out breath really helpful. The out breath is an opportunity just to let go and release. And in fact, this is what the body is doing. The diaphragm is just moving back effortlessly into this rest position. So when we breathe out, it's just a rest and a release.
Absolutely. There's no muscular effort required on the out breath. And I think that's kind of quite a helpful concept to get our heads around. So yes, belly breathing can be considered quite a calming way of breathing, but don't worry if you don't really notice much movement in that part of the body. Some of us just habitually breathe more in other parts of the body, and that's absolutely fine. There's no right or wrong way to be breathing. However, if you would like to explore belly breathing a bit more, and if you are struggling feeling it while you're sitting down, a little hint might be to try doing it while you're lying on the ground, like lying on your back. And if you pop your hands on your belly and just breathe kind of quite slowly and calmly, you might notice over time that there is some movement in that part of the body. So you can explore that if you want to.
Okay, so basically, when we breathe in, the belly and the chest rises, and when we breathe out, the belly and the chest falls back into the rest position. Don't forget though, as Kiri mentioned, there's also other parts of the body where you can notice your breathing. Your back may well move as we breathe, also the shoulders may move as well. See where you notice your breath. So should we all try some belly breathing?
Sounds good.
Okay, let's go.
So now we understand a bit more about how the breath works, we can use this to help us explore the qualities of the in-breath and the out-breath. So for the in-breath, this is very much our connection to the present moment. So with the in-breath, we are breathing in, so we're bringing our focus into the body. This can be really, really helpful when we think about how often our mind can be very scattered, focusing on the past, the future, but the in-breath just gives us that opportunity to bring the focus back into the present moment. What we tend to find really early on in our practice of meditation is that mind wandering will begin right from the beginning, and it will happen throughout the practice. And this will happen no matter how many years you've been meditating. The mind will wander. This is what minds do. But with each in-breath, this gives us an opportunity to bring the attention back to the present moment. So for me, when I'm in my practice and I'm noticing that perhaps my mind has wandered, I can use that in-breath to bring me back to the present. And it's there because we're breathing all the time, so the in-breath is always there as that opportunity. It provides some focus and clarity to my practice when I'm finding that my mind is wandering.
Okay, so let's have a think about the out-breath. The out-breath is also part of the present moment, but we bring to it a slightly different quality. The out-breath, we can perhaps adopt the qualities of softening and releasing. So perhaps if you wanted to, try it now. If you'd like to take a few breaths, just take a moment to notice. Perhaps on the out-breath, as we breathe out, the qualities of softening and releasing. On the next out-breath, just see if you can let go. Let go of the shoulders or the jaw. Release the muscles. If you notice tension perhaps within the body, that's an opportunity to be able to breathe into it, bringing that sense of release on the out-breath. There's no need to do anything to change it. Our body naturally tends to soften when we become aware.
Thanks, Sarah. I think I'll just add something else about the out-breath. Sometimes when we practice and we turn our attention to what's difficult in the body, we might kind of hope that there will be a release of tension or strain, but that's not always the case. And I think the out-breath can really help us in those moments. The out-breath comes with this inherent quality of letting go and letting be. And I think that's really helpful if discomfort should persist in the body. It kind of helps us to cultivate a sense that maybe we can accept our experience instead of judging or trying to fix it. It helps us get into the role of the observer of our experience. The out-breath helps us let go of additional struggle when we are finding things difficult. Okay, so why don't we use what we've been learning about the breath to try our hand at some actual breath-based meditation. We're going to learn a meditation now that we call the mindful moment. It's a brief meditation that takes place in 3 steps that we can count out as we practice. So it's important before we start the practice that we just think about the best way that we can sit so we're comfortable, and you might want to close your eyes as well. I'll ring this bell to start the practice and again at the end. To begin, counting 1 for the breath. So taking some slow, full but gentle breaths into the body. Having a sense of the inhalation of the breath and the exhalation on the out breath. Seeing if you can just let the breath come and go as it will, no need to control it. We're becoming curious about the breath on the level of physical sensations. So perhaps choosing a part of the body to follow the breath, maybe the nostrils or the mouth. Perhaps noticing how as we breathe in, the air is slightly cooler than on the out breath. Perhaps noticing the sensations of the tiny hairs on the top lip or inside the nose, moving subtly as the air flows in and out of the body. Or if you prefer, you could follow the breath deeper in the body, perhaps noticing movement in the chest or the belly. Just taking a few moments to follow the sensations arising as we breathe in and breathe out, moment by moment. And when you're ready, moving into the second stage, where we count 2 for awareness of the body. So widening your sense of the breath to include a sense that the whole body is breathing. Noticing sensations and rising and falling as the body is seated, resting in this moment. Perhaps noticing contact as our weight is supported by the seat or whatever you're sitting upon. Perhaps having a sense of giving up the weight of the body. Allowing gravity to support us in this moment. Becoming aware of any sensations arising or falling in the body. We're observing the body on the level of physical sensations, so no need to think about or worry about anything we notice. Remembering there's no right or wrong way for the body to be feeling in this moment. When you're ready, counting 3 for the mind. Being curious about your mind in this moment. Perhaps having a sense of whether the mind is busy or calm, stressed, or any other sense that you have when you turn your awareness to thoughts coming and going. And we don't need to engage with specific thoughts. Instead, we have a sense of thinking and the mind just being another part of our wider experience. So any thoughts that come into awareness, we can just see them as mental events, noticing as they come along, and then feeling free to let them go. Sometimes this can feel quite tricky. You could perhaps imagine that you could direct the breath into your mind. See if we could breathe in a sense of spaciousness and calm into this part of the body. Recognizing how the mind is linked both to the body and our experience of the breath. And for a few moments, holding all of these parts in awareness. And when you're ready, bringing the practice to a close. Breath-based meditation differs from the practices of our first video in that the focus tends to be more internal. So we're interested in our experience within the body rather than on external objects. I think this can make the meditation feel rich and can be of great value to us, but it does come with its own set of challenges. So we're going to take some time now to explore some of those challenges. And the idea is that if we can understand what might come up in our practice, we can also equip ourselves with the right mindfulness attitudes and values. And if we can apply those to what we encounter, we might find that any difficulty that arises just becomes part of our practice rather than an outright obstacle. So let's think about challenges that we may have encountered in our own practice. Katie, do you have anything to say about that?
Yes. When I started meditating, particularly in meditations involving the breath, focusing on the breath, this was a real challenge to me at the beginning. It was one of the biggest struggles, I have to say. My mindfulness instructor or teacher would say, observe the breath in the practice. And of course, immediately I would start focusing on the breath, having lots of thoughts about what the breath was doing and was I breathing deeply enough or too much in my chest or my belly, or how on earth can I breathe in the first place? I would start controlling my breath. I would forget how to breathe. It was just, it was a bit of a nightmare. So I found this a real struggle, and I did find myself trying to control my breath during the practice, which really kind of got in the way. What I found over time through patience and perseverance was that actually those kind of thoughts and sensations do pass. The struggle doesn't go on forever. And actually just by sitting with the breath, just sitting with the practice, that stage did pass for me. And it still comes up from time to time if I, notice something about the breath. But in a sense, bringing some curiosity to that, if I notice something that's a bit different, or I notice that my breath is a bit more shallow than it is normally, I just tend to bring an attitude of, okay, that's different. What can I notice about this? Rather than getting too caught up in whether it's right or wrong or what's going on. And that's tended to make me feel a bit more okay about that practice.
Yeah, that was very similar for me at times as well. I think the thing is stick with it. Yeah. I guess another challenge that I feel quite familiar with is the challenge of where our minds go when we start to meditate. And we'll be frequently talking about this issue throughout the whole of the course. So the propensity of our minds to churn out thoughts is something we're going to get very familiar with as we practice meditation. So we've got an example of this. So we're going to return to our friend Paul to see how he's getting on in his meditation. So it's a scenario familiar to everyone who meditates. You're just settling down, following the breath, getting comfortable. You're in the zone, so to speak. But before you know it, thoughts start to arise. And to begin with, you're not even aware that you're thinking.
Oh, damn. Forgot to pay the energy bill. How am I supposed to remember to do everything? I should really go to direct debit. That would be a lot easier. But is it the same payment every month by direct debit? What if my bills go up? I can barely manage to afford everything as it is. Maybe I should try to get another job. Find some evening work. I've always liked the idea of teaching. Perhaps I could teach meditation. Yes, I'd really enjoy that. I could run a group at the local community centre. Oh, hang on a minute. I'm meant to be meditating. My mind is lost in planning.
Don't worry, Paul. This is perfectly normal. It's like our minds are just wired up to think, and think some more.
Yes, and often we don't even notice, do we, that we're thinking. We're just getting on with our normal everyday tasks. And the thinking, it's just this endless kind of background chatter to our lives that's just going on for us until we start to meditate. And then we actually get to realise how endless this background chatter is. Made up of all sorts of things, to-do lists, forming opinions about what we're seeing or hearing. It might be we're thinking about what we're going to have for dinner later. Just lots and lots of things that become really apparent once we start to meditate and that distract us. But don't worry about this. The goal, remember, of meditation is not to have a blank mind, although that's what we sometimes think it is from our myth busting. We know that a blank mind isn't what we're trying to achieve. It's about having patience, bringing that attitude of patience to our meditation, simply noticing when those thoughts and that background chatter is present, not actually needing to do anything about it. So when we notice it, returning to the breath each time. So if we notice 100 times our mind has wandered off, 100 times we can just bring that back as best we can to the anchor of our breath.
I think that's enough talking. Let's go on to another breath-based mindful meditation.
So here we are, we're joined by our helpers again. We're now about to do a brief meditation on the breath. So if you're at home, feel free to join in with this. I guess a few words in terms of posture when we're meditating. It's often helpful for us to be in as comfortable as a position as we can be, making sure we're warm enough so we have less distractions. If we're seated for meditation, it's important to have our feet on the floor, flat on the floor, so we feel grounded, and the torso in an upright position. This meditation isn't about falling asleep. We need to be alert during a meditation. So, if we think about our environment, we have control over our posture, but a lot less control over our environment. There might be noises going on, we might experience some distractions. All of this is okay. There's maybe some wisdom in perhaps seeing if we're able to just accept those distractions exactly as they are without the need to try and change our experience. So, shall we get ready into our comfortable positions? So when meditating, seeing if we can just pay attention without judging, being that curious observer of what's happening for us. Let the experience arise exactly as it is. So allowing ourselves to settle into this position. Becoming the role of the observer of what's actually happening for us. Perhaps just checking in with ourselves, seeing if we're able as best we can to let go of the journey to this point, let go of the thoughts around the past or any thoughts around the future. Simply paying attention as best we can to our body sitting in this position. And when we're ready, bringing the focus of our attention to the breath. Perhaps seeing where we notice the breath in our body. As it comes and goes, it may be the nostrils, it may be the chest. Wherever you're noticing your breath. Perhaps noticing the breath just comes and goes. It may be forming a pattern or a depth. Seeing if we're able to let go of any need to control the breath in any way, experiencing it exactly as it is. You might find that your mind has a different view. It may be drawing your attention away. That's okay. If you notice that happening, you notice your mind has wandered, congratulating yourself, seeing if you can just bring your focus of attention back to the next in-breath in this moment. Our mind may wander 100 times. 100 times, we bring it back to the next breath. There is no success or failure. If you notice that your mind has wandered away from the intended focus of the breath, seeing if you can praise yourself and draw the focus of attention gently back, noticing where the next in-breath is in your body. Perhaps breathing into the body as a whole. And as we come towards the end of the meditation, just taking a few moments to be with the breath. When we hear the bell, it denotes the end of the meditation, where we open our eyes. So, let's find out how that was. Does anyone have any things that they noticed with that meditation?
Yeah, at first I found it like really hard to take my mind away from my thoughts. And I felt, sometimes there was a bit of like a battle going on between like trying to focus my mind on my breathing and my thoughts. But then when I let go of that kind of, internal battle, I felt really, relaxed and, it was really calming and soothing. And, I then realised, I've only got one choice to make, and that's between my thoughts and my breathing. And, I felt really good.
Great, thank you. Anybody else?
I was surprised to notice so clearly the sensations of the breath. For example, I could notice the air flowing through the nostrils or through my throat. I could hear the in-breath and the out-breath here, and also my abdomen expanding and contracting, and I don't usually pay attention to that, so it was quite surprising to observe it so clearly, to notice it. Yeah.
I guess for me, my attention was wandering away from the breath at first, but as I was able to refocus, I kind of connected back with the breathing, just the natural rhythm of the breath, and felt quite relaxed and quite calm as the practice went on. And I was able to stay with the breath a lot better.
Okay.
Yeah.
So lots of different experiences, and probably at home you had different experiences as well. So yes, thank you for the comments. If you wanted to do the breathing meditation in full, always remember that you can download the MP3 versions from the website. So we're finishing up this session with top tips for meditation. My top tip would be patience. As you start to now explore the breath, see if you're able to stay patient with yourself. It's not always an easy experience with meditation, and that's okay. Even if we just start to welcome in any distractions or difficulties that we might notice. It's a chance to see how we habitually react to these types of things on an everyday level. Imagine you're meditating and a neighbour's dog starts barking, or we hear lots of traffic noise from outside. Perhaps we'll notice that we get caught up in this thinking. See if we can just try to be with thoughts, feelings, or body sensations, the things that are arising from our meditation, and just be with that experience of distraction.
My top tip would be curiosity. Even when perhaps our meditation isn't going the way that we had wanted it to go, if we can try and cultivate an attitude of curiosity, this can help us stay patient, as Sarah was just talking about. A meditation can still be meaningful if perhaps the conditions aren't quite right, the dog is barking, or something is uncomfortable, or something's just not quite right. We don't need to judge it or try and change it. If we can try and just take that observer stance that we were talking about earlier, we can perhaps just stay patient with it and remain curious, interested in what's happening. Perhaps just naming what's happening. I know that can be helpful for me if I can feel myself getting caught up into overthinking or judging. So perhaps just naming that worry is here or distraction is here, and just coming back to the breath and remaining interested and observing what's going on.
My top tip would be choice. So even if we do decide at some point in our meditation to perhaps take some action, say there is a dog barking outside and it's very noisy, and we feel that if we shut the window it might reduce some of the distraction from that, it's possible that much can be gained from just delaying that choice by a few moments, just being curious about what we're noticing on our body, what the impulse is in that moment. By delaying our action, we can ensure that it is a choice rather than something we have no control over, like an impulse. I think this ties into a kind of slightly broader theme with mindfulness, in that we can't change the world. We can't change all of the conditions that we find ourselves in. Sometimes there are limitations and experiences that can feel quite frustrating, and we want them to be very different. But mindfulness teaches us that the only thing we can change is ourselves, our own reactions. And remembering we have choice gives us some chance that perhaps instead of reacting in a kind of knee-jerk fashion, that we might be able to respond with mindfulness and perhaps wisdom.
We really hope you've enjoyed this session on the breath.
Next time we'll be looking at the body.
And its mind.
See you
next
then.
time.
Bye.